Thanks for joining us for another Making Saturdays Awesome video. This one is in fact going to be the last Making Saturdays Awesome video because henceforth you will be in the space making cool stuff with us. The us that I'm talking about, myself, Sherry, who was previously the co-host, as well as Chris.
Hi, I'm Chris.
We are all going to be helping you build stuff and workshop ideas. That is the idea of today's project. An important part of the maker mindset is being able to improvise. Take what you have on hand and make it fit the circumstances or the requirements. And if it doesn't, edit it such that it does. One of the important elements that we've spent a lot of time on is moving stuff from one location to another, often through the air. We're going to make that a little cooler today. Basically, what we did is take what you have at home already, the kit, some supplies, previous builds, and again, just like last week, we sat it down, took a look at it, tried to figure out what it was we could do with it that might be kind of cool, that would engage both the technology, the mathematics, if you want to be really precise, engineering definitely, and then the entire idea is scientific to some degree, especially if you write down your results. The difference between messing around and doing science is writing down your results. So you measure things, you keep records, and then set yourself goals, and you can progress through that. Imagine as you are building ways that you can improve upon the design even as you're doing it, because no design is ever complete. It's just you stop turning your attention to that because it works sufficiently well or it fits the criteria that are set out. Here, we want to take things we've used before and make it into something that sends a thing flying in a way that we haven't yet done. Luckily, the person that is sitting to my right has worked through this problem, and we're going to build that and talk about why it works and considerations for making it work better.
One of the things that I wanted to do is I like things that fly around, and I thought, why not use some cardboard and use our trigger launcher? That will allow us to be able to make something fly. I did some problem solving and came across some cardboard here, one of my favorite materials, and I'm sure one of Warren's favorite materials.
Absolutely, always one of my favorite materials ever.
It is great to practice with, but also it can make some pretty robust, cool things as well.
It's also widely accessible. It's very trustworthy. You can trust that it will be pretty similar thickness and consistency across any one box, certainly, and then even more broadly, most boxes that are about the same width or the same thickness, you can trust that the cardboard will act the same across all of them. So, you want to start building?
Yeah, I think we'll get to this build. So, one of the first things we're going to want are some more popsicle sticks. You could either decide to deconstruct some previous projects if necessary. That is to say, not your trigger launcher for this one. We're also going to want to use a few of our sticks from our Da Vinci Bridge. As I mentioned, trigger launcher, cool glue gun. You want to have this plugged in already. We also may need a little bit of tape if we're going to kind of dry fit some stuff. You'll probably want your pencil in case you want to sketch out the shapes that you're going to want to do on your piece of cardboard. And we're going to want some scissors and some replacement cool glue sticks. When I started looking at this trigger launcher, I wanted to make this a little bit wider, and I wanted to make it to where it had a track to send the piece forward in a direction that I wanted it to go, not where it wanted to go. One of the first few things that I did, I took 2 of my popsicle sticks and I put them in a little V shape along the top here, and then that created a channel to send the airplane through. Conveniently, we have this little cube here, which is pretty much exactly where we want to put this. So we're going to put a dot of glue at the top of our cube here, right next to the jaws. And right now we're more or less just tacking this down, and this is going to hold this piece in place. So from right here, it's just been tacked right next to this cube. And I'm going to put one on the other side as well. And just because this is a small dot of glue, it will still allow us to kind of rotate and move this popsicle stick a little bit as necessary. We can sure these up a little bit more later, and we can add a little bit more glue to make it just a little bit more robust. but we just want to put a couple little dots just to hold everything in place while we start moving everything around.
This is a more advanced version of dry fitting, basically. We are not sure that this is exactly where we want it, but we do know that it's pretty close to what we're looking for. So we are getting it more or less in the right spot, and then we are going to mess around with its placement, which is why we don't put too much glue on to begin with. That said, I am tacking it down a little more so that my testing can be a little bit more extensive, and then I can just use the tip to remelt the glue to lift it off if necessary. That's something that you should get more and more used to as you begin really making more advanced things, is committing a little bit more to the build. A little bit more than that. And that's why I'm using more glue, because I know that I want to make sure that things work the way that I expect, and so I'm going to be putting slightly more stress on them. And so being able to put that stress on and then remove it through a process after the fact is useful to me in my build style. Maybe not yours. You can use tape to dry fit them to begin with. It's just more complicated, but uses a different tool that you might be more comfortable with. Whatever works.
And once you get those two ends tacked down, we're going to pinch these together slightly because we're creating just a little bit of a V. Now we don't want them to completely touch, or else that's going to prevent our guided slot from being able to move all the way through. So once you have these pinched in a little bit, you can put a small little dot of glue at the end here to get these in place. Another dot here as we hold it. And then once all of this kind of dry fitting is set, then what we're going to do is we're going to run a bead kind of like a weld line across the rest of this stick. And what that's going to do is it's going to make this channel really, really strong, so that when we actually go to launch some heavy stuff off of it, it's going to hold a lot better for what we're doing.
The science behind welding is more about taking two pieces of metal, heating them up to the temperature that they actually themselves melt, and bringing those into what at the molecular scale we hope is actually the same piece of metal. Here, on the other hand, we are instead just taking the two materials and giving them something that they're both adhering to, which is our glue, but we're not actually destroying the wood and then remaking the wood together. But this is a good example of the practical result of doing that.
I guess I could have probably been a little bit more specific and said brazing and or soldering. That's probably a bit closer to what I meant. We have now made our channel, and what we are going to want to do is make a piece to go through that channel. And what I did to make sure that I figured out what we wanted is I made sure that my two ends were not closer than what a single popsicle stick is, which I hope that yours is not that way. If I was not so studious to let you know to
You'll
not.
see that I glued mine down before I thought all the way through this, and so mine has a lot of wobble, whereas his has very little. It is probably better that there's very little wobble, a tiny bit, but very little, as opposed to what I've got here. We're gonna see that.
Yeah. It's all in the build. We're testing things out. We're gonna see how they work. So in order to make this channel to glide over this, we're going to take two popsicle sticks. The first one, we are going to put a bead of glue all the way down the stick. And then we are going to take our second popsicle stick and lay it over the top, about as centered as you can make it. And this is going to make a T shape, or it will make two 90-degree angles, ideally, on each side of that vertical popsicle stick. I found laying the glue down onto the flat part of the popsicle stick was a lot easier than trying to get it onto the very edge of the thin side, but your results may vary. You may find that that is a little bit easier for you to get together. We want to make sure the ends are pretty close to one another. They don't have to be perfect. In this particular case, it's not going to make a huge difference if there's a little bit of gap on one side or the other.
One of the ways I think about details like that is to say that they are not mission critical. It is mission critical that there is a rubber band attached to the end of your launcher. It is not mission critical that these two popsicle sticks are perfectly lined up on both ends. And knowing which parts are mission critical and which are not really helps in the making process. You'll see that I constructed mine in a slightly different manner. I put 2 tacks, one at either end of the popsicle stick, and then laid it down, tacked it a little bit more in the middle, and then laid beads of glue down the edges. Which one you choose is up to you. Again, it might be the case that his works a lot better than mine because now I've got bulges of glue along here, which is probably a bad thing for what we're going to do, considering this is going to run through this in a little bit.
The next portion that I did is I took 2 of these popsicle sticks and I made this into like an arrow shape. Now, the exact angle of which that you're setting yours may vary. I wanted there to be more points of contact onto what will become my wings. That made it to where there was a little bit more connection at the point that it's pulling my wings through the trigger launcher.
We talked about this in the pneumatics video, that we added structural supports along the way because there's a lot of mechanical forces going on. And one of the ways that a lot of mechanical forces added to something is when you accelerate it rapidly. The acceleration on a thing can often tear it apart in a way that wouldn't happen if it was just loaded at that amount, if it could just be loaded without any acceleration. Because of what it is that we're going to do, which is put this in here stationary, and then at some point open the throttle and accelerate it out. That means that we want this to be very well connected to whatever it is that's being accelerated out, if we want the thing that's being accelerated out to go. Do the wings first and then add this to it so that they will just be putting the popsicle sticks where they go rather than having to follow along the sizes we have to use.
Oh, so you're saying design the wings however we want them to be and then attach this whole sequence to it? Yeah.
Rather than building these older bits out.
Sure. Yeah, that was just how I approached it in the original one.
Yeah.
So, but that doesn't mean it was the best way.
No, but it's also you took into account the design limitation of the thing you had already built. And the design limitation is easier to take into account by just changing the angle here as opposed to cutting really accurately.
Good point.
This is part of the process. I know that me personally, I'm better at figuring out where I need to attach these things once I have the thing that's going to be attached to them than I am at cutting accurately. So I would rather cut as close and accurate as I can to my design and then be able to take up the slack here, be able to help the design work better by changing this very slightly, rather than doing this, getting it solidified and all ready to go, and then having to match this in my cutting skills. It's just what I trust in my own capabilities. Your capability set is going to be different than mine. Taking into account what your skill set is gives you access to building things that maybe on first glance it seems like you wouldn't be able to, whereas in fact you are. So keep exploring. That's what we're doing right now. We're just working through the process. Collaborative work like this, super fun, definitely a great idea. Anytime you want to build anything, really, it's a positive thing to have a group.
That being said, that is an absolutely great point that I went in with a different kind of vision of how I was putting it together. The order of operations isn't always finite. You don't always have to go in a very particular order. That's why we are going to approach this a little bit differently than I did in the first part, and I'm going to maybe try to learn something a little bit differently. At this point, we're going to shift over and we are going to use our piece of cardboard and we are going to design our wings. Now, there's a million different versions of wings that are out there. There's double sets of stacked wings for biplanes. There's very triangular shaped like fighter jet wings. There's airliner, like large bird wings. Here is an opportunity that you have to just try out different shapes and different designs to create something that may fly better in different circumstances. If it's getting accelerated really fast, maybe it will help to have really wide, really flat wings, whereas maybe if yours has a little bit more of an upward into a glide, maybe it's better to have just a couple skinnier wings that are in front of one another to play with how the air moves. So this is a point where you get to try out some different cool stuff, and it's only some cool glue and some tape. We can always try it again or try something a little bit different as we do this build. I'm going to try something maybe a little bit different than what I did the first time. I'm going to draw out something a little differently in shape. I'm going to use a marker because then we can see it a little bit easier. And also because my pencil ended up over here. I'm going to try something where I know I want to pull this through my trigger launcher. So as I'm pulling this through here, I don't want my wings to be really far forward so they might catch on the end or they'll catch in the guides. I want them to be a little bit behind where my guided piece is. I'm going to make a little bit of a tab at the front of mine to attach my guided piece to. And then from there, I am going to go back a little bit and make a shape. This isn't the straightest, this isn't the most perfect shape, which I could remedy by using a handy dandy ruler and a straight edge. I can measure, that one was 4 inches, and that one was 4.5. So I was right, it is a little bit off. I am going to change that because my hope is if I make these wings a little bit more even, it may fly a little bit more easily or a little bit more straight. Now you have a pair of scissors that you can use to cut this cardboard. Just be very careful because scissors are sharp, aka cutteristas. If I might make a recommendation, don't completely, just while we're working on this, throw out any of your scraps because you may be able to use those. Don't assume that you won't have any use for it until maybe after you completely completed. And I have my shape. Looks kind of weird, right? But I have a sneaking suspicion this little extra bit in the front is going to make it easier to attach stuff in a bit. I'm curious to see what Warren is getting up to in his shape.
You know what? Me too.
You might be able to make layers, so you can always cut and add some more pieces to this, and you can always trim something down to make it smaller if necessary. Oh, interesting. That's a fun shape.
We'll see how it works. But what I've done is taken my offcuts and just swung them around. I'm gonna pop them inside. Oh, I do notice a problem right off the bat though, which is I have all of this surface area to connect to this, and I've only given myself the ability to actually connect to about 1/4 of it. We'll see how that goes.
In my experience, I found that laying it out like this, I could see that I want to have my guided popsicle stick to hang out in front of my design a little bit. So I'm gonna have about half of this stick attached to this on its own. I want there to be a little bit more surface area. In this case, I'm going to end up making a shape like this, and then these are just going to face the angles that I cut at the top of my tab here. I am going to shape it something like this when I go to attach it. The easiest way I think that's gonna be to do that is to glue these two down onto my shape first, and then I'm going to glue my guided piece to the top of those two with a couple little dots of glue at the corners because I want to dry fit this a little bit further, but I do feel pretty confident that this is where I'm going to want to have this, so I'm just going right ahead with the cool glue here. However, if you would like to test this with tape first, this would be a good opportunity to do so, unless you feel pretty confident they're going to be where you want them to be. So I have glued those two on. As you can see, it's not perfectly straight, but we'll see how it wants to cooperate with me going forward. Then once I have those two on, just like that, I'm going to take this piece and I'm going to glue it down here and up at the top. Here we go. Good to go. Muy bien. I am happy with how that looks.
I've taken a different approach, which is I can see that because of my design, it's going to be difficult to get space if I already had my track guide in to be able to put these wings on nicely. So instead I'm building this while I can lay it as flat as possible, and then I'm going to put my track on.
I'm so excited to see yours. That is such a cool shape. I wish I would have thought of that one. But it won't be too late. If I decide that I like his in the end, I can just, copy it and just do something a little bit different. Try my hand at something a little off from what he did.
Another cool thing about using cardboard is that you always have straight lines that help you that you can use as a reference. That winds up being super important.
You mentioned that to me now.
It's looking to me, because we're considering aerodynamics, that is, the flow of air over some object, it's looking to me like these open cells in what's called the fluting of cardboard are going to catch a lot of air. So I might wind up taking a piece of tape and just putting it over that and just wrapping it over. Even though it adds a little bit of weight, and so that increases gravitational drag, a non-contact force, it also cuts down on the aerodynamic drag, which is a contact force.
The fluid of air.
Indeed.
We are just about at the same spot. Warren's going to decide how he wants to put in his braces. You may find that those aren't completely necessary for you, but at least what I found is that when there's a little bit more weight pulling it forward, it makes it fly a little bit easier. So I like it both for the stability and the amount of weight that it adds to the front. As we're kind of moving forward here, you can kind of test fit and see that your plane here can actually slide through the groove that you made. And if it's super loose, it may kind of be hard to sit up. You can see mine is wanting to wiggle a lot, so it's not going to be as easy to control when I'm going to launch it. I'm going to add some braces and kind of widen my trigger launcher a little bit so that there's a little bit more surface contact with the wings as it's sitting on here. And the exact placement of that may just depend on your particular design. I like to keep it a little bit closer to the back just because then it's not going to interfere with the trigger portion itself as much. So I am going to put a little dot of blue right back here. And this isn't a very heavily structured piece of this, so it doesn't need to be super strong. It's just meant to give the wings something to touch onto so they're a little bit less likely to wiggle around on here. Now I have this bracing on here, so that gives it also a little bit more surface contact here, and then it also just gives us a little bit more stability.
Very excited.
Yeah, yes. So now is the time where we get to do our test fire. So all you do is you set this bottom end of the guided piece into there, and then you can pull. Now you can see I have a little bit of an issue. This is preventing me from grabbing my trigger as much as I'd like. So I'm gonna make that change while we see what happens with Warren, since he very expertly seems to have taken that into account ahead of me. So I was
so excited I had to take some pictures of mine because it might break, but it's good to take records. That is me writing things down.
So I cut out a triangle on mine. It's not centered, it's not even, but we'll see what happens. I think, let's both turn away from potentially anyone.
Yep.
All right, 1, 2, 3. Mine failed.
Okay, mine went okay.
What I think happened with mine is, remember how we mentioned that we wanted this to be tight, but not too tight. I may have gone a little too tight, while Warren, he was concerned about his being a little too wiggly. His was fine.
Yeah.
And one more shot and see where it goes.
Yeah.
Cool. I was pretty happy. This flew okay. It moved very quickly, which my assumption is that the weight was not too high to keep it from moving so quickly, but it didn't fly as far or quite as stable as I would have liked it. So I think I'm gonna add a little bit more wing to this.
which is interesting because mine flew okay, but not really as far as I would like. So I am going to subtract a little bit of wing from mine.
So now, that's my shape. We'll see how this one goes.
Again, it's important that you not point these at anyone when you fire them. But as long as you're not pointing them at anyone in particular, then especially not at your co-host, that's very important.
Yes.
But
Oh, you're waiting on me. I'm sorry.
we're
I'm so
waiting on
slow.
you.
I'm so slow.
They don't mind.
Oh, but see, now I have a new problem. I have made this so long that it's wanting to tilt back and off of here. So, as to not make Warren wait any longer for his excited launch, I'm gonna just scoot back a little bit and make a couple slight adjustments while he launches his plane.
Oh,
You're good at
interestingly,
aiming, Warren. A little better. User error.
that was definitely PEBCAC. That is problem exists between keyboard and chair. What happened, I think, is that I reduced the control surfaces. When I went to reduce the weight by removing these, I reduced the amount of surface area that was controlling what was happening. And so it just kind of flopped. A new design, I think, is necessary. So, for me, at least, back to the drawing board.
For me, I added a little bit of bracing that seems to have helped ever so slightly, but probably not nearly enough. And let's see how this goes.
Perfect.
Perfect. See, that's what this is all about. This is all about trying things, failing, trying again, and trying not to do the same mistake twice. And I failed one more time.
Wonderful.
So
Wow.
maybe what I thought was over engineering was actually necessary this time.
Perhaps that was just engineering. Awesome.
Fun thing now, this was our last Making Saturdays Awesome digital video.
And it in fact worked. That was pretty cool. When you come in, we will build all kinds of cool stuff. We are going to make future Saturdays awesome. Now though, in the space. I hope you enjoyed this. We certainly did.
Yeah,
we will
we did.
see you soon.